Okay, this is the Unit 2 review packet. This is on imaginary numbers, topic 6a and topic 6b. So we're going to look at 25 through 30. So start with the simplify. When we talk about I, right, first of all, I is the square root of -1. That's what I is. When I raise it to a power, there are only ever 4 things that I can get. I can get I to the 1 is just I. I squared means the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. That's -1. I cubed would be these two things multiplied together. I times -1 is -I. And I to the 4th would be this one, I squared times I squared. So -1 times -1 is 1. It is always going to be one of these 4. So if I had a small enough number, I could actually write these on my paper and go through, like say I had I to the 9, and I wanted to know what it equaled, I could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I would know I to the 9 equals I. But if I have bigger numbers like I do here for 48, you can count 48 times. So the way I can do this is, again, everything's in groups of 4. So I'm going to divide by 4. And when I divide 48 by 4, I see that it's 12 with no remainder. So if I look at this one, I could either say, okay, no remainder, or I could call this 11 and 4/4. Because what I really want to do is look at the remainder. This one doesn't have remainder, and match it up with this. So either when you don't have a remainder, either realize that's I to the 4th, because if I divide 4 by 4, there's no remainder there either. Or you could turn it into this. But this is basically saying no remainder. This is the same thing as I to the 4th. So divisible, right? If I had I to the 8th, there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I to the 8 would be that. It's divisible by 4. So all of your numbers divisible by 4 are just 1. So I to the 48 was divisible by 4. It's the same as I to the 4th. It equals 1. I to the 25, we would do 25 divided by 4. And when I do 25 divided by 4, I get 6 and a 1/4, 6.25, which is 1/4. That 1 up there means that I to the 25th is the same thing as I to the 1, and I to the 1 is just I. Now, you can also do this on your calculator. So if you have your own calculator, it may just show the answer nicely. If you're using one of the school calculators, you got to kind of know how to look at it. So I on your calculator is down here above the period. So if I'm doing I to the, do second period to get the I, then this little caret button, and then 48. Now, this is what you have to get used to. On the school calculators, you're going to get kind of this messy piece here. This is really saying this is a really small number. It's basically 0. -2 times 10 to the -13, that's a really small number. Just looking at just the 1, because this part is close to 0. So the answer is 1, which is what we got. Same thing with this one. If we put in I to the 25, again, I get this messy thing, but I'm going to ignore this piece. This is my close to 0 piece, and I'm going to say it's just I. So it really helps if you're going to use your calculator to find these, that you know it's only going to be one of these 4 things. It's I, -1, -I, or 1. So when you get a messy thing on your calculator that has this other thing that's not I, -1, -I, or 1, that should be a good kind of memory jogger. Oh yeah, it can't be that. I'm supposed to ignore that little part of times 10 to the -13 and just look at the part that's not next to that. So again, on this one, I would ignore the -2e times -13i because that's close to 0. And this one, I would ignore the -5e to the -13 because that's close to 0. Or you can do it this way by dividing by 4. When I add or subtract, I am just basically combining like terms. I have the real number part, and then I have the imaginary part. So my real number part always comes first. I write it as real part plus imaginary. So real plus real, 2 plus 3 is 5. Imaginary plus imaginary, that equals -2i, and that's my answer. Here, same thing, except I would want to distribute that negative first, so -7 plus 5i. All I did was distribute the negative. And then again, real and real, 3 minus 7 gives me -4. Imaginary, imaginary, 5 plus 5 is 10i. Or 5i plus 5i is 10i. Multiplying is like multiplying polynomials. 4i times 8, the number part times the number part. 4 times 8 is 32, and then I just write the I, because I didn't actually multiply anything with the I. Another I with it. 4 times 2 is 8, and I times I is I squared. So the only difference between a normal polynomial that might just have x's here instead of i's and this is every time you see I squared, you need to remember that I squared is -1. And you're going to replace it. So I'm going to say 32i plus 8 times -1. And now I've got, this is no longer an imaginary number. I have 8 times -1. I'm going to write that first because we always put the real number part first, plus 32i. So this part right here would be a really good thing to write on your test paper when you get it, to brain dump that information that I just highlighted in purple with what I equals and what I to the 1, 2, 3, and 4 are. All right, same thing with 30. Just like a polynomial, I'm going to draw a box. I've got 6 and 2i, 4 and 5i. 6 times 4 goes here, 6 times 5i, 2i times 4, and 2i times 5i. So this is where I have an I squared. So I need to replace that with -1. So this actually is -10. And I can actually combine these in the box without taking them out. I've got like term, like term. 24 minus 10 is 14. And then I have imaginary, imaginary. 8i plus 30i is 38i. So again, my only difference here is when I am multiplying, if I get an I squared, I need to replace that I squared with -1. Other than that, it's the same thing as multiplying polynomials. You can also do these on your calculator. So quick reminder, you need to be in this mode right here. So if you push mode, which is next to your second button, make sure you're A plus BI. And then I could put this 4i parentheses 8 plus 2i. Make sure it's exactly what's on your paper before you push enter. Do a quick check. And there's my answer, -8 plus 32i. Or this one here, parentheses 6 plus 2i, 4 plus 5i. Do a quick check. Make sure you've copied everything exactly as it is on your paper. Push enter, and there's my answer.